and good evening. Viewers, fourth generation war is essentially a civilian non-military doctrine which is characterized by attack on ideology, culture and social values, small combat actions by non-state actors, media and information warfare and psychological operations. Many questions arises in this situation today. A nuclear-armed nation is in a state of collapse. Is Pakistan under a massive fourth generation war which is triggering a rapid collapse of the state into a failed dysfunctional country like Somalia? Did America attack on Afghanistan in 2001 to topple the Taliban regime that was allegedly providing safe havens to Al-Qaeda leadership and Osama bin Laden? Starting fourth generation war on Pakistan soil, is this the real aim of America? Was not to eliminate terrorism while it attacked Afghanistan, but it was to create a foothold from where they could control the politics and economy of the whole region. Taliban Pakistan was established fundedly either by US or trained and given intelligence logistics support by CIA, Mossad and later by Indian RA. All these questions we would like to know. Why was Pakistan never allowed to make peace in tribal areas? Why all its efforts to negotiate with militants were destroyed by America by killing people like Mullah Nazir, Baitullah Masood and now Hakimullah Masood? All these questions, why drone attacks, CIA Blackwater operations on Pakistani soil, providing of safe havens to terrorists like Mullah Fazlullah and other Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan's leadership. And the big question is that what is the future of Pakistan and what would be the options for Pakistan in this fourth generation war scenario? We would like to know all these aspects, and Mr. Zaid Hamid is joining me. Assalamu alaikum, Mr. Zaid Hamid, and thank you for joining me. As you can see that we would like to talk on the major fourth generation war scenario that we are seeing globally and then how that is affecting Pakistan. But before we start our discussion, we have put together a report to give an update to our viewers on fourth generation war concept. Let's have a look at that and then we will get back to our discussion.
This mode of warfare is least understood by the policy. Fourth generation warfare is conflict characterized by a blurring of lines between war and politics, soldiers and civilians. The simplest definition includes any war in which one of the major parties' strength is not a state but rather a violent non-state actor. Fourth generation warfare is defined as conflict which involves the elements like complex and long-term terrorism tactics. A non-national or transnational based, highly decentralized, a direct attack on the enemy's culture, highly sophisticated psychological warfare, especially through media manipulation and lawfare. All available pressures are used, political, economic, social and military. Occurs in low-intensity conflict involving actors from all networks. Non-combatants are tactical dilemmas, lack of hierarchy, small in size, spread out network of communication and financial support. Use of insurgency and guerrilla tactics to fail a state. For the last 12 years, Pakistan suffered 100 billion losses in war on terror. In the last 5 years alone, almost 100,000 Pakistanis have died or wounded in urban war. Terrorism, insurgency, rebellions and high-intensity conflict being fought within the boundaries of Pakistan.
Yes, Mr. Zaid Hamid, as you saw our report, today we would like to talk on this fourth generation war concept. And when we look around ourselves globally, we see this happening. We have the examples of those countries which you will let us know about. So let us know what is this fourth generation war concept?
You see, this is the most unfortunate part, that the entire greater Middle East is being reshaped. And the people living in this entire huge region still do not understand what is happening to them. Condoleezza Rice had said a few years ago that this is the birth pang of a new Middle East. A new Middle East is being created, and it's violent birth pangs, the violence, the bloodshed, the reshaping of the maps that you're seeing. And all this that is happening from Sudan to Pakistan, this entire arc, which is basically a Muslim landmass, that entire landmass is being reshaped. It's being dismembered. It's being redrawn. And The war that is being imposed upon this entire region is called the fourth generation war. And this concept needs to be explained further, because it is not a conventional war that is waged upon this region. It is not a nuclear war that is being waged upon this region. It's a war in between a conventional war and a nuclear war, where regular countries, regular armies do not attack a land, do not attack a country, but they soften it up before in invasion. They soften up that country through sanctions, through political collapse, through economic collapse, through support to violent non-state actors, support of insurgencies, supporting ethnic, religious, sectarian wars within that country, and imploding that country to such an extent that it almost becomes a failed state, unable to resist a foreign invasion and occupation, either for an occupation or for dismemberment. Let us give you examples. The First World War, the war that was fought between 1914 and 18 between the nations, is called the First Generation War. The war that was fought on the borders, the war where soldiers basically died, the trench warfare, the famous trench warfare of the First World War. The wars never reached the cities. The war never reached the civilian, ordinary people.
They were in the battlefields.
They were in the battlefields. And almost 80% of the people in the First World War who died were soldiers. In the Second World War, you find a more positional, more mobile warfare, not a positional war. Aircraft carriers were used, aircraft came in, tanks came in, and the wars were fought within the countries. London was decimated, Europe was decimated, Russia was decimated, Stalingrad, Leningrad, you see all the cities were flattened, and the wars were fought in the urban streets. 80% of the people, millions of people died, and almost 80% of them were civilian population. So that kind of warfare was called the regular second generation war. It was a regular conventional war.
In which the civilians got involved as well.
It was a conventional war, not involving nuclear weapons, but it was fought all over the country, fought within the cities also, but primarily major armies fought within the cities. The Cold War period, from 50s, 60s and 70s and early 80s, the entire Cold War period is called the Third Generation War, in which basically the threat, the world was divided between the communist and the capitalist bloc, and the threat was of a nuclear exchange. But after the dismemberment of Soviet Union in almost around 1990, when Soviet Union started to disintegrate, the Cold War was over. And the America emerged as the only superpower of the world. The world turned out to be unipolar at that particular time, for that particular moment. And Americans exploited that opportunity by deciding that they are going to reshape the world. They had the opportunity. The Soviet Union was destroyed. They were still licking their wounds. They were still trying to stand up on their feet. But at that time, America had the entire world at their disposal. So the first invasion that they did was on Iraq. It was a high-intensity invasion, but Iraq was not decimated. But what the Americans did was, they imposed a sanction, an embargo on Iraq for the next 12 years almost. And that embargo was meant to destroy and weaken Iraq, prepare it for a final annihilation, which came in 2004. For the next 12 years, since 1991-92 till 2004, America did not invade Iraq. They only enforced no-fly zone, enforced sanctions, economic blockade, no trade. They were not allowing any development into Iraq. They imploded, slowly worked, supporting insurgencies in Iraq, Shia insurgency, Kurd insurgency. They were actually creating militant groups, various kind of insurgencies. And in 2004, when finally America decided to invade Iraq, we know the results. It's all history now, that Iraq could not resist. Occupied, insurgencies erupted. Now Kurdistan is separate, Shia Iraq is separate, Sunni Iraq is almost annihilated. Americans took over, and now Iraq is almost a failed, dysfunctional, decimated state. Almost, even when the war is finished now, there's There is no active resistance going on. Still, almost 1,000 people a month are dying senselessly in car bombings.
Let me ask you this, Mr. Zaid Hamid, before we proceed further, that this fourth generation war concept, is it only for the Muslim countries alone?
I'm coming to that.
Other countries are also threatened with
exactly,
this concept?
I'm coming to that. So in 91, they started off this concept in the Middle East by first invading Iraq. But simultaneously, they were deploying this concept in Europe also. Yugoslavia was the only large European country which was pro-Soviet, pro-Russia at that time. And Americans decided, NATO decided, they cannot have a pro-Russian country in the middle of European heartland. So Yugoslavia had to be dismembered. But remember one thing, nobody invaded Yugoslavia. How do you dismember a country which has fifth largest army in the world? And still you don't want to attack it with either with conventional weapons or with nuclear weapons. So how do you do that? This is exactly where the first major deployment, active deployment of fourth generation war took place in the heartland of Europe, when NATO and Americans and CIA started to support ethnic and religious groups based on various provinces of Yugoslavia. Croatia was supported, Bosnia was supported, Montenegro, Kosovo, while Serbia was being supported by the Russians, which was trying to keep the Yugoslavia united. And you know the result between 92 and 95, genocide took place in Yugoslavia. All the ethnic communities and religious communities fought with each other. The regional countries only supported various proxies. Somebody supported Bosnians, someone supported Croatian, Russia supported Serbians, and NATO supported Montenegros and Kosovos. And when the war decimated Yugoslavia completely, the entire Yugoslavia was literally flattened, then in the end NATO got involved, used brutal force, precision force, moved in with airstrikes, separated the combatants, and forced out a peace agreement called the Dayton Peace Agreement, and which basically dismembered Yugoslavia into 5 or 6 countries as you see today. So this was the most classic example of an active deployment of fourth generation war, where you destroy countries without getting involved militarily from the beginning, but only move in the end through precision strikes to separate the combatants and basically dismembering the countries, reshaping the maps. The map of the Europe was also reshaped between 92 and 96 using this fourth generation war doctrine, using economic collapse in Yugoslavia, using the media warfare, fueling the ethnic religious hatred, supporting the proxy groups. Result, within 3 years, the fifth largest country of army of the world were disintegrated, could not keep their country together. So this is an active example that you have in Europe also.
So then when we look closer and we see Israel and we look around the countries, all the states that are surrounding Israel, they look like in a mess. We have the example of Lebanon, we have the example of Syria, Egypt, whatever states are surrounding closely to Israel, they are in a state of headless states. What do you think, that do they not want any strong Muslim factor around Israel? Is that the main reason?
This is precisely the point. As we said, after the Soviet Union was destroyed, America emerged as the sole power, and they saw this window. They knew that within next 20 years or so, Russia will emerge again. So the window that they had, the next 20 years, they had to reshape. They had to do whatever they wanted to do in the greater Middle East.
Isn't Russia already emerging again?
Now,
the way it supported Syria against the US military strike?
Americans probably gave themselves 20 years. They knew within 20 years, Russia will rise again. But before that, they needed to. Americans wanted to grab all the land and territory, reshape the Middle East as they wanted. And they, after Yugoslavia, they immediately, within few years, you saw them moving into Afghanistan in 2001. Afghanistan was never the objective. All this war, that the reshaping of the Middle East is taking place, only an insane man would believe America is doing this for Al-Qaeda, or America is doing this for weapons of mass destruction, or weapons of chemical weapons in Syria, as they are saying it. The disinformation.
So then what about 9/11? Who operated 9/11?
You see, again, it's an old debate now. But the point is that who was the beneficiary of 9/11? Definitely not Muslims, definitely not Muslim countries. The only beneficiary of 9/11 was the CIA, were the Americans, were the Israelis, who actually used the context, who used the example of or the incident of 9/11 to deploy their 4th generation war within the entire Muslim heartland. The Iraqi weapons of mass destruction propaganda, you remember that very well. The Americans, before they invaded, they launched massive psyops in the world, information war. The weapons of mass deception were launched to create a perception that Iraq has weapons of mass destruction. That's how it was. And this was the media information warfare axis. The fourth generation war cannot be fought without a most massive, most powerful disinformation, psychological warfare, information warfare propaganda machine, which the Americans have in the form of CNN, in the form of Fox, in the form of BBC, in the form of all the media empires that they have built around the world, where they are even investing into the local medias of the target countries. Like in Pakistan, for example, in 2001, when they invaded Afghanistan, Afghanistan has nothing. Afghanistan had no strategic leverage for them other than the fact that it brought the US and the American forces in closest proximity to Pakistan and Iran. And Pakistan, by that time, was an Islamic nuclear armed weapon state. Americans and Israelis would never allow any Muslim country. That's a red line they could not allow any Muslim country to cross. Pakistan crossed that red line without their permission. Without their permission, and became a nuclear armed weapon state. We exploited the American weakness during the Soviet war. While they were dependent upon us to fight the Soviets in Afghanistan, we exploited that US vulnerability and weakness to emerge as a nuclear weapon state. But since then, since 1990, Americans had imposed embargo on Pakistan, sanctions on Pakistan, because we had made nuclear weapons. In 1998, when we exploded our nuclear device, then of course the entire world was alarmed. The Americans had made it a point that even now, even the red line, the second red line has also been crossed, and Pakistan's nuclear weapons need to be taken away. So in 2001, they come into Afghanistan using the pretext of 9/11. They come into Afghanistan, but instantly what the Americans started to do was they started to create insurgent, terrorist, non-state violent actor group, militant groups inside Pakistan, like Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, Balochistan Liberation Army, and the militant groups in Karachi.
Mr. Zaid Hamid, we have to take a break here. We have arrived to the conclusion of how this fourth generation war, which we were seeing happening globally, has arrived in Pakistan. We will talk on this more. Stay with us. We'll be right back after a short break. Welcome back, viewers. We're talking today in our show on the fourth generation war concept. Viewers, it's not the war that is fought in the battlefields. It's a war in which non-state factors are involved. These are the violent non-state factors that weakens the country from within by putting pressures on all the elements as political, economic, social, and military aspects, and then putting a pressure or a psychological warfare through the media manipulation as well. And how all this is happening in Pakistan, we will talk on that as well. Mr. Zaid Hamid, before going on a break, we figured out that how this fourth generation war is happening around us, and specifically it's targeting the Muslim countries and the states around Israel. But now it's happening in Pakistan also. We are seeing certain elements penetrated in Pakistan. What are the specific? You said Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan is one.
See, giving you the example to start from. See, Pervez Musharraf was an ally of the Americans. Why did the Americans decide to remove Pervez Musharraf? It's a very interesting question, because everybody in the world believed Pervez Musharraf has been an absolute loyal American ally in the war on terror in Afghanistan. Why did the Americans have to remove him? The fact is, even though Musharraf was absolutely loyal to the Americans, he was also the army chief. He was also the commander-in-chief of the Pakistan Army. And Pakistan Army as an institution is the bulwark of defending Pakistan. And as long as Musharraf remained as the president as well as the chief of army staff, there were certain red lines he could never cross. And he had refused to the Americans that, for example, compromising on Pakistan's nuclear and missile program, giving access to the Americans a nuclear missile program. And there are certain other defense-related, security-related aspects, despite the fact that whatever Musharraf did severely damaged Pakistan. He gave full access to the Americans in Pakistan, the CIA, created terrorist and insurgent groups. He opened up the media in Pakistan. Musharraf opened up the media, which allowed the CIA and Indians to invest into Pakistani media to create the information warfare weapon platforms, which were waging war against the Pakistani state and the army and the ISI itself.
So what you're saying is that allowing the freedom of speech by Musharraf,
and with allowing the freedom
it's not the freedom of speech
allowing the freedom of speech without putting the safeguards and checks on it, allowing the foreign hostile powers to invest into Pakistani media, one of the greatest blunders of Musharraf that he did. But as we said, being the army chief, he had his limitations. So what the Americans decided to do in 2007 was to remove Musharraf and bring a more docile, more loyal, more subservient slave under the name of democracy. And that's why you find in 2007, as they say, the idiom goes, be nice to America or they'll bring democracy to you. So this is exactly what they did to us. We were not being very nice to Americans because they wanted Pakistan to destroy the Jalaluddin Haqqani network. They wanted Pakistan to attack the Afghan Taliban also and increase the axis of war that we are already fighting. Compromised on a nuclear weapon program, we did not do it. So they brought in democracy.
Let me put this together. What you're trying to say here is that Musharraf was not cooperative with US as much as the democratic government.
Musharraf wanted on so many things. He could not do it because he was the commander of the army as well, and army did not wanted those things to happen. For example, Musharraf honestly wanted to recognize Israel. He really strongly, he tried very hard to recognize the state of Israel. Army resisted. Army said, no way, nothing can be done about it. And there would be a rebellion in the army if Musharraf tried to recognize Israel and open up an Israeli embassy in Islamabad. So these were the things which even Musharraf could not do.
So you think now these democratic governments will open up the embassy of Israel?
That was not important. See, they tried at that time, but then again the priorities changed. What Americans felt, Israelis felt, is that bringing in people like Zardari, they could bring about a more urgent collapse of Pakistan. They could bring about a more ready collapse of Pakistan through a total economic failure, bad governance, mismanagement, corruption, financial embezzlement. And this is what we have seen ever since this democracy has come into this country. Where Musharraf left Pakistan, Pakistan is now almost on a precipice of disaster. We are facing an existential war, not just on the axis of militancy, on the axis of economic collapse as well. The media is most hostile. Certain segments of media are most hostile right now, waging a war against the nation, army, and the ISI and the national ideology, spreading sectarian, religious, ethnic disharmony, hatred. So basically what they are doing is, through the information war, through the media war, through the economic collapse.
Mr. Zaid Hamid, let me just put these things together that you're saying it out. That is media spreading the ethnic and sectarian killings. That's what you just said.
This is what I'm saying is that the fourth generation war is a holistic war which has a militant arm, which has an information warfare arm, which have a judicial arm, which have a political arm. And we are seeing that all these arms are being simultaneously deployed against Pakistan right now. And they are being deployed under the facade of democracy. Ever since this democracy has come into Pakistan in the last 6 years, our collapse has accelerated. This democracy has not saved Pakistan or benefited Pakistan. We are almost on the verge of becoming a failed state. And once you declare Pakistan a failed state, then the global perception would be built like they're building today in Syria, that Syrian chemical weapons are, Syria is using chemical weapons, or they built against Iraq that they had weapons of mass destruction. Now they're already building a global perception that Pakistan's nuclear weapons are about to fall into the hands of the terrorists. So Pakistan's nuclear weapons should be taken away. That's the ultimate objective. You see, the problem with Yugoslavia was that Yugoslavia was not a nuclear armed state. And they could actually wage a massive war on Yugoslavia, dismember it without worrying that who would control the nuclear weapons. But in Pakistan, they can't do that. We have the hundreds of warheads. They're spread all over the country. They're controlled by the army. And what the Americans fear is, if they go in too fast into Pakistan, they bring about a very fast collapse of Pakistan like they did in Yugoslavia, Pakistan's nuclear warheads could actually become a threat to the Americans and to the Indians as well. While the Pakistan army is intact, the Yugoslavian army was fighting against its own provinces. The Pakistan army is a symbol of federation. It's keeping the country united. So and the NATO supply lines never passed through Yugoslavia. The American and NATO supply lines passed through Pakistan. So they cannot implode Pakistan too fast. They have to go slow in Pakistan. And this is the thing. This is the leverage that Pakistan had that allows us to fight back, to use NATO supply line as a leverage, to use our nuclear weapons as leverage, to use Pakistani as a symbol of strength for the Pakistan army, as a symbol of strength for the Pakistani state, and respond back. So Pakistan has actually turned out to be the hardest country in the world. For the last 13 years, they are waging this war.
You mentioned that NATO supply line should be used by Pakistan as a strong aspect, to tone down US. So the PTI stand, which they have given the ultimatum of November 20th, you think that this is the right way to go?
You see, the point is that, as we said, the fourth generation war is a holistic war against Pakistan. It's a war on economy, it's a war through media, it's a war through military access, it's a war where non-state violent actors are being used. So handling one aspect, for example, if Pakistan army crushes the militancy, still we would lose the war. Why? Because the economic collapse, on the other hand, is still taking place. Still the information and media war against Pakistan is still waging. The point is, this war is not just a military war. It's an economic, political, media war as well. So this is what the problem is. The government of Pakistan in Islamabad, well, first, we don't have a government. This government has only come about 6 months ago or 5 months ago, and they're still confused, disoriented, totally lost.
They're having two sessions, one inside the parliament and one outside the parliament. So you don't see this government, they're working double.
The government doesn't exist. The economy is collapsing. The media is totally out of control. Even the judiciary is out of control, because in the sense that judiciary in this times of crisis is not supporting the army nor controlling the media. So basically the judicial role is that while the petitions are being filed in judiciary against hostile media, they're not being heard. As a result, the hostile media is absolutely free to demolish the state from within. So this is the crisis. So even if you stop the NATO supplies today, the point is that stoppage of NATO supplies has to be backed up by solid moves to silence the hostile media and recover the economy.
What solid moves should be backed, in the NATO supply closing?
To start with, you see, the point is that Pakistani state has to come together. All the elements of Pakistani state, the government, the parliament, the cabinet, the judiciary, the media, and the army, they have to sit together, form a united and very strong policy that it is the presence of the foreign forces in Afghanistan which is actually bringing about this massive violence inside the state. Because when there is violence, 100,000 Pakistanis have died in Pakistan, $100 billion worth of losses, all because of American presence in Afghanistan. You don't need a rocket scientist to figure it out that Americans need to be thrown out. You don't need a rocket scientist to figure out that it is the American presence in Afghanistan which is imploding Pakistan from within. So, solution is very logical. Throw the Americans out by any ways possible. Blocking the NATO supplies, blocking the air passages, taxing them, so backdated taxes for the last 13 years, force them to pay, so your economy recover also and the war also stops. And of course, then destroying the militant proxies that they are sending towards Pakistan. Whenever Pakistan try to cut peace deals with militant groups, you know that, you have seen it, that the Americans send in a drone, kill the man who's trying to talk to Pakistan. As a result, the war against Pakistan continues. So right now, as the scenario is, Pakistan army is going to have a new army chief. So entire responsibility of defending Pakistan is going to fall on the shoulders of the next army chief. And if he is a weak man, he will not be able to handle this war, which is now annihilating the country on the militant axis.
What about the political leadership? Where does that stand?
Confused, disoriented, totally lost. They are not even willing to acknowledge what a fourth generation war is. You ask the Pakistani Prime Minister, you ask the Pakistani President, the parliamentarians, not a single person even know what a fourth generation war is. You ask him what is first generation, second, third or fourth generation war, they have no clue about it. They still think that the entire reshaping of the Middle East is happening because of the drone warfare in the tribal areas. So stupid they are. They have no idea what they are talking about.
So stopping drones won't make any difference?
Drone is only it's an aberration. It's something, it's a violation of our sovereignty, but the point is, drone is only a one minuscule aspect of the war that is being waged. The hostile media is also a violation of Pakistan's sovereignty. Pakistan's IMF's invasion into Pakistan national policies is also a violation of Pakistan's sovereignty. The support to insurgent groups, the terrorist groups by India and RAW and CIA is also a violation of Pakistan's sovereignty. Not just drone. Drone is only a minuscule aspect.
Like you said, that insurgency of RAW, CIA inside Pakistan, but doesn't that show the lack of responsibility on the intelligence agencies' behalf as well?
You see, it is not just as we said. As we said, the intelligence agencies or the armed forces cannot fight this war. They may win the battles, but we'll still lose the war. Because we are losing the war on the economic axis, on the media axis, on the judicial axis, on the diplomatic axis. We are winning on the military axis, and for the last 12 years we are fighting this war. We have given 100,000 people dead and wounded. This is an absolute staggering cost for a nation, for a war which was imposed upon them because of the American presence in Afghanistan. An American nation, an American government must understand this, that they are responsible for this bloodshed. And to respond to this, you cannot hold intelligence agencies and army responsible alone. They are in fact the only people, only organization, only state organ which is actually delivering, which is actually fighting back, which is actually keeping the country together. The media is not delivering, government is not delivering, judiciary is not delivering. Then how is the Pakistan still remaining intact?
But then, Mr. Zaid Hamid, how about we get to hear these allegations on ISI supporting Taliban or Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan? What do you have to say in this scenario?
You see, the point is, I wish they were doing it very aggressive, very strongly. I wish Pakistan was strongly supporting Afghan Taliban to dislodge the Americans from Afghanistan. We are not doing it. We are only taking losses. Pakistan is being graded, Pakistan is being projected in the world, again through weapons of mass deception, through PSYOP as the epicenter of terror.
Any support from ISI towards TTP as we hear these allegations from the other end?
Towards Pakistan Army support to TTP is an unthinkable option. I mean, 35,000 Pakistan army troops and men and officers have died at the hands of TTP. How could army be supporting them? How could ISI be supporting them? Every office of ISI from Peshawar to Multan has been bombed. Hundreds of officers have been dead and wounded all over the country. How could ISI be accused not even an insane man would accuse ISI of supporting TTP. The point is, Americans have been accusing us of supporting Jalaluddin Haqqani, the Afghan Taliban. Americans have been accusing us of supporting Hikmatyar or Mullah Umar's group. But the fact of the matter is, we have not been supporting them, though we have not been attacking them also. We have not been destroying them, because we don't feel any need. We've already got our hands full fighting a fourth generation war which is asymmetric, decentralized and urban. The whole Peshawar is a battle zone. Whole entire Pakistani urban metropolises, urban cities are battle zones. I mean, you go into Islamabad now, you won't even recognize the city that we knew about 10 years ago. Everywhere there are barricades, the police checkposts. I mean, the Marriott bombing, Marriott was a symbol of Islamabad. The whole Marriott was bombed by a car bomb. And what is this happening?
Mr. Zaid Hamid, I have to take a break here. We will continue our discussion. Viewers, stay with us. We'll be right back after a short break. Welcome back, viewers. We're talking on the fourth generation war concept today. We would like to know that is Pakistan under a massive fourth generation war threat, which is triggering a rapid collapse of the state into a failed, dysfunctional country? Who is responsible for this garbage? How can we release ourselves? How can we get ourselves out of this? Do we think the presence of NATO in Afghanistan and India on the east has now created a genuine threat for Pakistan? What kind of other threats are we facing at this point? US and India supporting the unrest in Balochistan to create a reason for intervention and independence. How can we tackle that? And what other challenges are we facing today after the Muslim countries that have been toppled down in this fourth generation war concept, as we have Syria there, we have Egypt there, we have Yugoslavia there, we have Iraq there, we have Afghanistan there. Now is Pakistan the target of this fourth generation war? Mr. Zaid Hamid, before going on the break, we we came down to the factors that are affecting in Pakistan as well. We have Balochistan, where we see Baloch separatists there. Then we have KPK, we see terrorism there. Then we have Karachi with law and order situation there. So we have already 3 provinces of Pakistan in big trouble. How do you see this recent development of the death of Hakimullah Masood and then the new appointment of the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, Fazlullah, as the new leader of TTP?
See, this is exactly what we are saying, that Americans will never allow that war on the western front of Pakistan should subside. RAW would also do the same, because never in Pakistan's entire history, we never had our troops on the western border. We always had our entire strength facing the Indians. So what the Indians have done is they've exploited the American presence in Afghanistan to send in insurgencies into Pakistan. So now Pakistan has to withdraw hundreds of thousands of its troops from the western border towards the east. And now the western border stand exposed. And the objective is that once the internal collapse crosses a certain red line, the Indians would roll into Pakistan under the military doctrine of cold start. They have actually developed a military doctrine which says they will enter into Pakistan from 12 different places, for example, without warning. That's why it's called cold start. There will be no warning. They will just roll into Pakistan for a mopping up operation, for a cleaning up operation, where Pakistan Army would be involved in decentralized urban war, fighting in the urban centers or fighting the local terrorists. So whenever Pakistan tries to cut a peace deal on the west, the CIA moves in to support the RAW, Indian intelligence, and they assassinate the tribal leader or the militant who was actually waging a war against Pakistan. Exactly last week also Americans did exactly the same when Hakimullah Masood was assassinated, and now his successor, Mullah Fazlullah, is a hardcore, known anti-Pakistan, anti-army, pro-India RAW asset. So now there is absolutely no chance of any peace deal between Pakistan and Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan. And now Pakistan Army will have to fight a bloody war, because what the TTP has said is, the new chief, what he has threatened is, and Pakistan's intelligence agencies have also reported that now TTP is going to target the leadership of Pakistan. Nawaz Sharif, his brother Shehbaz Sharif, their families, they will be targeted also, because now they want to bring about a collapse of the Pakistani state rapidly.
Mr. Zaid Hamid, now that we know for sure that Fazlullah has refused to do any peace talks, so what should be the frame now of Pakistan Army, Pakistan government? How can they be on the same platform against Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan?
Nawaz Sharif must understand now that the peace deals have been killed not by Pakistan but by CIA. CIA drones have assassinated everybody whom Pakistan have tried to contact for cutting a peace deal on the western border. So now Nawaz Sharif must realize that Americans have betrayed him. And the only hope for Nawaz Sharif is to rely upon the army and the nation. Nation have to be brought together on one unified platform, that we have no other option but to fight. And then he must strengthen Pakistan Army. Now the greatest decision of Pakistan national security rests on Nawaz Sharif's shoulders, that when he has to appoint the next army chief. And now he should keep this in mind, that next army chief will have to fight a long, bloody, dirty war. And if he appoints somebody who has no experience of war, then Nawaz Sharif must be very sure that his family would be the first to be killed by TTP. If he wants Pakistan to be defended, his government to be defended, his family to be defended, he must appoint a strong army chief who can fight TTP.
TTP. So now that we know for sure that Fazlullah has refused for any peace talks, what would be their plan to move further? What are they thinking right now?
Fazlullah is the man who had assassinated the army general in Sawat, General Ahsanullah. About last month he assassinated him. And Fazlullah has track record in Sawat, because he was the one, if lots of people don't know his background, but Fazlullah was the head of TTP in the entire Swat Valley, where Pakistan Army had to conduct a massive operation few years back to liberate the entire valley. Almost 3 million people had to migrate out of the valley. Pakistan Army moved in, cleaned up the area, and Fazlullah escaped to Afghanistan under the protection of Afghan National Army and RAW, as well as CIA. And he remained, since that time, for last 2-3 years, he's still in Afghanistan, protected by NATO, protected by CIA, protected by RAW. And now his training areas, his bases, his weapon supplies are in Afghanistan. So while Pakistan Army and the political leadership should gear up for a long and bloody war, as long as Fazlullah is protected in Afghanistan, this war will continue. And multiple access response will have to be built. One is engaging the Afghan Taliban to eliminate Fazlullah, engaging the Americans to eject from Afghanistan, pushing them out, destroying the Indian assets in Afghanistan, and even going into Afghanistan to eliminate the TTP bases. All these things, the next army chief, the next Pakistan army will have to do. And Nawaz Sharif must be wise enough to understand this. Because if he doesn't do this, he himself will be the first casualty of this war. Because the objective of this war is only to create anarchy in Pakistan, make Pakistan a failed state. And to
nuclear weapons.
To create a failed state, failed politics, failed economy, failed security situation, so that the world perception can be built that Pakistan nuclear program or nuclear weapons are going to fall into the hands of the terrorists. So Nawaz's own survival depends on having a strong army. That's the only line of defense he has. If he goofs up, if he blunders on appointing the correct army chief, he's finished. He's a dead man.
Now, let me just connect some few dots here, Mr. Zaid Hamid, as we are seeing things happening, that Hakimullah Mahsood was eliminated because he was inclined towards having a peace talk with Pakistan. Now we see Fazlullah as the new leader of TTP, and he has refused to do any kind of peace talks. So that means TTP is openly challenging Pakistan now. The only challenge to handle TTP now left for Pakistan is the Pakistan army to go ahead and make a strong military action, like a military operation. So basically we are seeing a warfare zone in Pakistan, and that will give enough reason to US to invade in to get to our nuclear power.
The point is, as we said, that this is an urban decentralized fourth generation war. It's a war which is almost fought mostly into the urban centers. It's in the tribal areas as well, but the war is also being fought in Peshawar, in Islamabad, in Rawalpindi, in Lahore, and in Karachi also. But why Pakistan has not been able to eliminate these insurgencies is because the judicial system has not delivered. So this is now the responsibility of the Nawaz Sharif government also to make judiciary deliver its constitutional duties of punishing the terrorists. But Nawaz Sharif government have put an embargo on death sentence. The judiciary is not convicting the terrorists, and even the hostile media, when the cases are being filed against media which is waging the perception war, information war, judiciary is refusing to listen to the cases, because even major elements, certain elements of judiciary are also involved in this fourth generation war, in bringing about the state collapse. So the holistic strategy has to be built, because this war that you are seeing now against Pakistan is now going on for the last 13 years. Pakistan has emerged as a solid country. We are still holding on. Pakistan is a hard country. It's not a soft country still. But if the collapse continues as it is, in the next 6 months or next 1 year, we will be in grave crisis, right? See, for example, it was 14 years embargo and against Iraq, which ultimately collapsed the Iraqi state that they could not resist. Whatever they are doing to Pakistan, then everything would now rest on how Nawaz Sharif behaves from here. His entire efforts of engaging the TTP have been destroyed by CIA. Now what option does Nawaz Sharif have? Keep engaging the TTP which doesn't want to talk? Or strengthen his Pakistan army, unite the nations, bring a consensus that now we have to fight. And if at least the military access, if he can eliminate, then the economy and then the rest of the aspects can also be recovered. Judiciary has to be strengthened, terrorists have to be eliminated, corruption has to be stopped, and when you deploy the national unity has to be strengthened, ideology has to be strengthened. When you do these steps, you destroy the fourth generation war, because 90% of this war is non-military. It's economic, it's judicial, it's political, it's media. Only the 10% of it is military access, which is of course bloody, but still only an aspect, only a segment of the larger fourth generation war.
So now that we know for sure that the peace talk has been eliminated, we have wasted so much time in having peace talk. We had APCs, and then finally we were about to have the peace talk, and then Hakimullah got eliminated, and now Fazlullah have announced that no peace talks with Pakistan at all. So basically we are seeing some hardcore steps should be taken from Pakistan army and Pakistani government. And what you are trying to say here is that Nawaz Sharif has to be in a position of decision making. But seeing Nawaz Sharif previous analysis, if you look at his previous durations, you think he has the guts and
this is the unfortunate part and the most critical part of our history.
Decision making to go ahead and have a military operation.
In the most dangerous, most critical part of our history, we are ruled by a leader who's the most confused, most indecisive. And this is the unfortunate part. He should have known by now that Americans don't want peace in Pakistan.
But then why don't we see just the least interference of TTP in Punjab as a province of Punjab? How come they have maintained the province of Punjab away from TTP's?
You see, in the past, Nawaz Sharif has been one of the greatest supporters of TTP. He's been talking that army operations should be stopped against them, they should be protected, we should engage them, we should talk to them, despite the fact that they have killed 100,000 Pakistanis. Again, completely wrong strategies. But he has been giving out signals that he has a soft corner for TTP. And ever since he has come into power, though, we are seeing a single focused agenda that we must engage TTP and all army operations must be stopped against them. But now he should realize it's not the Pakistan army which has destroyed the peace efforts, it's the CIA. And he should talk to CIA. He should understand this, that the Americans and the CIA are betraying him. Americans and CIA want Pakistan to be destroyed. It's the Americans and CIA and RAW who do not want war to be stopped. And if Nawaz Sharif still continues to bootleg the Americans, then I'm afraid he should count his own days, as well as we should, God forbid, forecast the demise of the Pakistani state. It won't happen, but this is what the enemies are planning. And our politicians, our leaders, are not foreseeing it, are not responding to it. The threats are holistic, and the response cannot be military alone.
Thank you very much, Mr. Zaid Hamid. Viewers, as you saw that we analyzed the entire situation, now that we know that the new leader, Fazlullah of TTP, has refused to have any peace talks, this is the time that now as a nation, as a Pakistan army, and as a political leadership, doesn't matter if it has judiciary involved, it has media involved, we all have to stand together, united, so that no setback can set us back. That's it for tonight. See you all next Sunday. Until then, Allah Hafiz and good night.